Yeah. Welcome everyone to Podcasts and You. I see a lot of unfamiliar names in the chat. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Sammy. I am the Events and Education Coordinator at Goosefoot. So I run all of these workshops. I get to work closely with our businesses to help support that community. And I run all of our events and our social media. So new ways to communicate with folks is always very near and dear to my heart. And also for those of you who are not familiar with Goosefoot, we are a nonprofit located on South Whidbey that works with the South Whidbey community to create essential solutions by connecting neighbors, supporting local businesses, and preserving great places. So these workshops really help us fulfill that mission to support our local businesses however we can. And in this trying time, I know it can be really important to get online however you can. So today we're going to be looking at podcasts. So for those of you who are not familiar, podcast is a series of spoken word audio episodes all focused on a particular topic or theme like cycling or startups or pretty much anything you have an expertise or an interest in. It's a new way to communicate your ideas without having to worry about being on camera if you're like a lot of people and are afraid of being seen in front of people. Podcasts are audio only, though you can visually record them as well if you would like, but they are primarily used while people are doing other things, such as commuting to work or working in the garden. There's really podcasts on everything you could imagine. Some of the most popular ones I'm familiar with are focused on history or true crime, or there's one I know a lot of my friends listen to that's a group of actors playing Dungeons and Dragons together. There's genuinely podcasts on every topic you could think of. The biggest thing with a podcast, though, that I want to stress is it is a series. It's really not meant for one-off episodes. If you're getting into podcasts, you need to have a number of things to talk about, not just a one-off. So before you start your podcast, consider a few things. Why are you making a podcast? Who is it for? Why should they listen to you out of all the things they have to do in a day? What are you going to talk about? And how often will you release? We'll look at a few of these, but I just realized I forgot to do a couple more housekeeping things. For those of you who have never been to a Zoom webinar before, you can hear and see me, but I cannot hear and see you. Your only way to communicate with me is by using the chat function, as a few of you are. You can type out your thoughts and your questions. There's also a question and answer feature. You can put your questions into either chat or Q&A. Doesn't matter to me. I'll read them from both and do my best to answer them as we go along. You've lost my video. That's strange. Sometimes some things will go in and out depending on your signal. Zoom might drop your something in order to have the connection be stronger. But please feel free to ask questions away, interact with one another. As I said on the first page, please switch your to all panelists and attendees so that you can all talk to each other, not just me. So back to the workshop, you've considered some of these things. So what do you actually get to do to start? Well, first off, you need to choose a topic, obviously. What is it you're going to talk about? Are you going to do a history of the area? Are you going to do an in-depth, deep dive into your business's particular subject matter? Are you going to give your thoughts on certain things? There's motivational podcasts. There's ones that look into psychology and therapy topics. There's really no limit. Hiking, biking, swimming, pretty much anything you could think of. So what is that topic that you are both passionate enough and knowledgeable enough to talk about for multiple episodes? And along that format, you should go figure out what your name is. Now, your topic really should be something that is pretty focused. You don't want to do outdoors. That's so broad, nobody will be able to find you. You might want to do something more specific, as I said, like hiking or camping or backpacking. The flip side of that is the name. You might want to go for something a little more broad. That way it gives you the wiggle room to expand as you see fit. Take for great example, Goosefoot's name. The founders specifically went with that so we wouldn't be pigeonholed into any one function, and we had the flexibility to grow and expand into whatever role we needed. Same thing with your webinar, or your podcast. Choose a topic that is focused enough that you can successfully talk on it, but choose a name that's broad enough that you have the flexibility. Consider your format and consider your equipment and editing. So we're actually going to go into these individually. Topics. I mentioned this earlier, but pick something broad enough you can talk on it for many episodes, but not so broad it's not going to appeal to anybody. You all know that old saying, you can't please everybody, because if you try, you're going to please nobody. So instead of travel, focus on European travel, or instead of outdoors, focus on hiking. What is it that you can talk about that is you have passion and knowledge about? Also consider it's also easier to talk at length with another person. So is there someone else who shares your interest or knowledge on a particular subject that could possibly help you do your podcast? They could either regularly work with you on it, or you can focus on guests that you bring in for individual episodes. And as I said earlier, choose a name broad enough that you can expand into the future if you so choose. Last thing you want to do is to change your podcast name down the road when you shift focus, because just like with your business, every time you change your name, it's like you're starting from square one. Nobody's heard of you before. You don't have that brand recognition that people know the name and they trust you. So try really hard not to change your name. Pick a name that will work for you into the future. Format can be the tricky part of podcasts. There's really no rules on what a podcast looks like. It can be as long or as short as you need it to be. As I mentioned before, there's so many podcasts out there. I've found ones that are 5 minutes or less, especially motivational or meditational. Those kind of podcasts tend to be very short and come out more frequently. But I also, as I mentioned before, one of the most popular podcasts I know of is a group of voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons, and their episodes are well over an hour long every single time they do it. As long as you're focused and delivering something of value, you can go as long or as short as you need to be. It's best if you can script it in a way that you cut out all of the fat and all of the off-topic ramblings, because you might lose people. So stay focused, get it as short as you can, but don't force yourself to follow some arbitrary number goal. There's a lot of different formats to podcasts. You can do an interview. Where you're interviewing maybe a specific person each time or different guests each time. You can do solo. This would be very much solo. I'm just talking to myself, to the microphone, to the camera, and no one else is involved. You can do panels where you have multiple people on board. You can do conversational or co-hosted ones where you're just talking to another person. You can do nonfiction storytelling. These are the ones I mentioned earlier, the history ones, the true crime, the travel ones. You can do fictional storytelling. That's the Dungeons and Dragons, the, reading your novel broken up into podcast format. Or you can do a hybrid show where you do different things each time as your topic requires it. So don't feel like you have to limit yourself to one type of format. They all have their bonuses, they all have their drawbacks. Obviously, for something like solo, you don't have to work around someone else's schedule. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and editing a single source of audio is a lot easier than editing multiple sources of audio. Flip side is you have to talk the entire time. You don't get to lean on someone else to help with that burden. You have to do all of the work, all of the promotion, and you have to have enough knowledge and interest in the subject to talk for an extended period of time in multiple episodes. So figure out which one best fits your subject matter and your ability level, but you can always shift as you go. So don't pigeonhole yourself into any one format. Give it a try and change as you need to. A pretty standard episode format for most podcasts is you give a teaser of what you're going to be talking about. You've all heard this on news broadcasts, tonight at 8:30, we will be talking about blah, blah, blah. Something nice, short, just tell them what they're in store for in the episode. Intro music is very common. You get people in the right mindset that, all right, it's time to start this episode. It's another recognition thing since they don't have the visuals to rely on. They can't see your face. Give them a welcome spiel. If you get ads, this is one of the most common ways to fund podcasts in this day and age, is they have a little ad spot from some sort of sponsor. Or you could also advertise your own business or another local business that maybe compensates you in some way. There are very strict rules on ad spots with the federal communications. So you need to make sure you're following those. You disclose that it's an advertisement and that you're being paid to say what you're being paid to say. You can find a lot of guides online about how to do that legally and properly. And then you get into the main content of your episode. Talk about the thing you said you were going to talk about back in the teaser. Have a call to action at the end. Tell people to subscribe or share with their friends. Tell them to go to your website or give you a call. Whatever it is that you actually want them to do after they've listened to you talk, tell them that in very explicit terms. And then you go into your outro music. Now, I'll talk about the music a little bit later, but you can there's some free stuff you can use online. The problem with that is the quality is always a little questionable and it's very generic. Because it's free, it's used everywhere. So if you have the funds, maybe talk to a local musician about writing you something. There are a lot of them here and they don't cost that much. So it's a good way to support other local businesses and create something that is very uniquely you and your business. So you got your format down. Hopefully you have something pictured in your head about what you'll talk about. Now let's talk a little bit about equipment. Equipment is super vital for podcasts. You have to be able to deliver a pretty decent quality of sound or people are not going to follow you for very long. So first thing I would buy if you're interested in starting a podcast is a USB microphone. The microphones that come default with webcams or laptops or phones are rarely of a good enough quality to get the quality of sound you need to run a podcast. You've really got to get a USB microphone, and luckily they are not expensive at all. We talked about this a little bit in my webinar last Friday on online videos, but I have this, this little USB mic that I use for these. Cost me $40. It's not expensive at all. And as you can hear, it's a pretty decent quality sound. You can always upgrade as you go. This mic, as much as I love it, it does not have great sound isolation. So if I were to type while I was talking, you'd get that lovely clacking noise of my keyboard. So if I were doing podcasts regularly, as I got more comfortable, as I got more used to people, I would probably upgrade my microphone over time. But for now, this $40 USB mic is more than sufficient. So make sure you find one. There's so many articles out there online, videos that review one or the other. And a lot of those are not necessarily paid by any one company. It's genuinely just people who are very passionate about the subject. So I unfortunately am not a tech master, so I don't know if I would recommend anyone particularly. But there are a lot of resources out there if you're looking at finding a microphone. Obviously, the next piece of equipment you need is your hosts, whether that's just you or somebody else. You need people to talk in order to have a podcast. So figure out those hosts, and then also figure out a quiet space where you can talk, you can record your pieces as long or as short as it takes without being interrupted, without a bunch of background noise. When I first launched this webinar, one of the attendees asked if their mic was off because they didn't want kids disturbing them. As funny as those videos are of some professional trying to work from home and kids running by in the background and screaming and doing weird things, it's not very professional. So try to find a quiet space, whether that's, getting your family out of the house for a walk or going to your closed business and recording there. You really need a nice, controlled, quiet space in order to record your podcasts. So next up is editing, probably the scariest thing for most of you. You've got your script, you know what you're talking about, you've worked out how your episodes are going to work, and then you've recorded them, but now what do I do? I'm not, an editing master. How do I put this together in a podcast? Well, luckily I was doing a bunch of research, and there is a site called Elitu, which is the first one listed on the screen here. It is basically a drag and drop podcast maker. You pull in your audio files like you talking or your intro music, you drag and drop it into the right order, and it asks you for the right thing at the right time. It knows the typical podcast structure, so it's going to remind you what you need, and it's going to put it in the right places. It's a very easy tool to use. It's not too expensive. As you can see, it costs $28 a month or $280 for a year. If you buy ahead of time, you get 2 free months. I haven't personally used it, but from me fiddling around with it before this, it is incredibly easy to use, and it's genuinely meant to just walk you through how to do everything. If you don't want to use Elitu, there's a free tool called Audacity, which is open source. Anybody can use it. Anybody can download it for free. It's a lot more complicated than Elitu, but not as much as more professional software. But again, it's completely free. There's the link. You just need to give yourself some time to train you how to use it best. And of course, Adobe Audition, if you have the Adobe suite, this comes free with it. It's the higher end, really professional quality option. But with that, as with most Adobe programs, it's incredibly difficult to use. So I would highly recommend, if you want to go that route, giving yourself a lot of time to explore and fiddle and train yourself. Make sure you always save things as separate files when you fiddle so you don't damage the original file. But these are pretty much the top ones I would recommend. There's always other ones out there that you might hear of that you might get recommended, but these are the ones that came out on top in my research. Kind of funny that they all start with A, but I guess they're going along with the audio theme. All right, so you've figured out your content and your name. You've figured out what you're going to be talking about. You've actually recorded it. You've edited it. Now what do you do with it? A lot of people think, oh, now you list it on iTunes or any podcast subscription service, but not quite. There's some steps between that first. First off, you have to pick a host for your podcasts. iTunes or Spotify do not actually hold your audio for you. You have to have it published somewhere else before you submit it to them. So you have to pick a host for your podcast. You could do this on your own website. You could use a podcasting host service. There are a lot of options, and I have one later in if you need a recommendation, but figure somewhere out where you're actually going to put your podcasts where people can access it. One of my biggest advices would be to record all of your episodes in advance and then release them on a schedule. Instead of recording episodes as you get the ideas for them, this runs the risk of you petering out pretty quickly. You will run into I don't know what to talk about anymore, and I've only put up 2 episodes, or I ran out of time, or I just don't have the time to do the research, or this is way more involved than I thought it would be. Podcasts only succeed if you're consistently doing them and you're consistently releasing them. So make sure if you're doing a podcast, you are really in it for the long haul. And I would very highly recommend recording all of your episodes for the season in advance. And then you have plenty of time to edit them as you need. You can edit as you go, but set up that schedule. Are you going to put them out, once a week, twice a month, once a month? How often are your episodes actually going to come out? And hold yourself to that schedule. I talk about consistency in a lot of these webinars, but consistency in podcasts is absolutely crucial. You need to continuously stay on your schedule. And the only way you can do that is by recording them all in advance. So get all of your episodes recorded before you put them out, before you put any of them out. And then put them out on a schedule. Don't get overexcited and dump them all on the same day, because now you've just wasted all of that nice, careful planning you put in. If you are going to go ahead and submit your webinar, your podcast to a directory such as Spotify or iTunes, they already need to be hosted somewhere else, as I mentioned. It takes time for those official directories to approve you, especially for your first episode. They've got to do quality checks. They have to run it through their system. So don't expect that the day you submit it to one of these, you'll be able to release it to everybody. Take your time and explore. It might take a week. It might take a day. But submit it first, let it get processed, and then announce to everybody that it's available for download. You can also, if you don't want to go through these official directories, you can release your podcast for free on your own website or through your newsletter or social media. As long as you have that audio file hosted somewhere, people can download it and listen to it on whatever software they feel like using. You don't have to charge for your podcast. Your podcast can cost money, or it can be completely free. It's whatever makes sense for you and your business and what you're trying to achieve with it. But, don't be afraid to use your other tools. And even if you do put it up on iTunes or Spotify, they do not market it for you. You have to let your audience know it exists on your own. You have to put it up on social media. You've got to put it up on your website, put it up in your newsletter. Once things get back to normal and you're back in the store, put signs up in your shop, create little cards you can give people. You've got to use traditional and other methods to let people know that this is a thing that they could go and listen to. Podcasts don't just magically, put themselves on people's computers. So that's the fun publishing part of it. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of other tools to help you with podcasting. Buzzsprout is one I kept seeing recommended over and over in a lot of articles. It is a host that holds all of your podcast episodes, but it also has a lot of tools built into it that will help you promote and create those podcast episodes. Their plans are anywhere from free to about $24 a month. They have different services that they offer at different price levels. You could go check that out on their website under the pricing tab. And I would also highly recommend Canva. Canva is really great for creating cover art of your podcast and also promotional graphics to let people know, hey, come check out this podcast. This is what it's about. This is why you should listen to it. Again, as I said, you really have to let people know to come and listen to your podcast, download it in whatever way makes sense for them. But there's some tools, again, There's so many out there that I can't even get into in this workshop. There are entire podcasts just on running podcasts, on the best equipment, on how to brainstorm and storyboard, on how to organize it, on how to recruit guests. So if this is something you're really interested in, you're really passionate about, luckily, this is something that is very popular right now. The joke I've heard a couple of times is, back in the 80s, everybody wanted to start their own, garage rock band. And now everybody wants to start their own podcast. And it's honestly just as easy. You just have to have passion for it and interest in it and not be afraid to try. Write out a few episode ideas, come up with a nice little script, find a friend that'll help you if you're afraid to do it on your own, get a cheap USB microphone, record some episodes, find some music, put it together and see. You never know. You might wow yourself. You might be like, this wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it was. And I really do have interesting things to talk about. Because I don't know about you, but I sometimes get talking about something and it snowballs from there. I go, oh yeah, and this and that, and I forgot about this. You are so much more knowledgeable about the subject of your business than anybody else. That's why you got into your business. Don't be afraid to talk about that. Whether you have a clothing business and you're talking about, the sizing industry or how to select the right fabric or, tips for finding something that's flattering for you. Or if you want to talk about, therapy and psychological techniques or guide people through meditation. For those of you who teach classes or interact one-on-one with people, that's huge fodder for subjects of podcasts. And I do want to say, do not be afraid to give it away. A lot of young business owners, and I don't mean that by age, I mean that by experience level, they are afraid to give away too much because then why would people give you money? That over and over the research shows that's not a founded fear. You're not giving away everything and then there's nothing else to pay you for. You are showing people that you are confident and knowledgeable in your subject. You're not, faking it. This isn't a front. You genuinely know your stuff when you do videos, when you do podcasts. And that just makes people trust you, like you, and want to work with you more. I've seen it a lot in emails I get from you folks afterwards, in the comments on these videos. You guys don't be like, all right, I went to the workshop, I never need to talk to Sammy again. No, you decide, oh, I need individualized help or I need help on something else. So you guys keep coming back to these workshops. You keep emailing me your questions, which is great. So don't be afraid you're going to give it all away in the process of doing a podcast. It's just showing off your passion and your knowledge and your experience in something. So that's kind of my spiel on podcasts. It's pretty short. I apologize. We only went half an hour rather than 45 minutes because it's so individualized. Depending on what you're talking about is drastically going to change how long you talk or how often your episodes come out or how many episodes there are. You could do a series of 10 episodes. You could do a series of 5. You could do a series of 80. And then you could do multiple series. So it's so individualized and it's hard for me to cover it in this sort of a format. But as promised, this workshop is 45 minutes long. So I'm here for you guys. If you have questions, please put them in chat, put them in the Q&A. I will do my best to answer them. You guys can also talk to each other a lot. But the rest of the time is yours. So please let me know what you guys need. And if what you need is to head out to the rest of your day, I completely understand. Thank you for coming. We have a huge array of workshops coming up. I'm doing these crash courses for the rest of this week. And then we also have some 2-hour workshops sprinkled in throughout. I know I have Intro to Instagram on Thursday night. So if you're interested in more of our workshops, please check out goosefoot.org/workshops. I do record all of these workshops and we put them up on our YouTube channel. So you will all get the link to this video once I've processed it, and you can click through to our channel and see all of the workshops we've done so far as well if you're interested. I don't have this available for download. I have it open. I have it up on YouTube, but if you would really like the video file, I would be happy to send it to you. Just let me know. Let's see, Marion asked, can you talk through again what is required to actually air one's podcast? It sounded like you can't just put it online yourself. You actually absolutely could put it online by yourself. You just have to have somewhere to put it. If your website has audio file capability and enough storage that you could put it on your website, you could absolutely do that. The tricky thing though is just audio files take up so much more space than say a photograph. So you have to have enough storage space to put it there so that people can access it. If you have it in your Dropbox folder and you want to open that up to public access so anybody could access that folder and pull it from there, that's one way. If you have a WordPress site with sufficient storage and you want to upload it to that, you could absolutely do that. Or you could use, a tool like Buzzsprout where you can store the audio file and people can access it from there. You can absolutely put it online by yourself. You do not have to use one of these official directories like Spotify or iTunes. You can put it up whatever makes sense for you. The only reason I bring up Spotify and iTunes is that's where people are used to going to find their podcasts. But if you just want to put the audio file up on your site for download, absolutely acceptable. That is a great way to do it. Julia asked, is the YouTube channel a Goosefoot channel? Yes, I started a Goosefoot YouTube channel just for these videos. We might expand and put other stuff up on there later, but for now, it is just full of all of the recordings of these workshops. So it is, yes, it is a Goosefoot community fund channel. Any other questions? Audio files are a lot of fun because you can listen to them on your computer. You can listen to them from any sort of like Google or Apple Music. You can download them to your devices so you can listen to them on the go when you're doing other stuff. So podcasts are really just tapping into our love of listening. Marion asked, can or should podcasts be used exclusively to see something? I'm not 100% sure what you're asking there, but podcasts are almost never visual files. This is a video, not a podcast. Podcasts primarily refer to the audio, and people are used to downloading it onto their device and listening to it on the go or while they're out and about doing something else, gardening or washing the dishes where they can't watch something. That's why people do podcasts. So you can record and release it visually. A lot of the podcasts I have friends that watch do that as well, so you can watch them. But the primary function of a podcast is the audio. So it's not really meant for visually showing off something. That would be a video, not a podcast. Let's see. Can I recommend a subtitle service for podcasts? Most podcasts do not have subtitles purely because, as I said, they are audio files. They're not, you can do it visually, but most podcasts are audio only files, and there's such a thing called descriptive, what is it called? It's descriptive captions for people who are visually impaired. It describes what is happening verbally, so that for people who can't visually see things. But since a podcast is meant to be an audio file, it doesn't necessarily need the descriptive captions. You don't need subtitles for something that is audio because you can't read it. If you are uploading it as a video, There are so many subtitle services out there. Some are free. Some you can do manually yourself, so you can get exactly what it is. I don't personally recommend any one over the other because there are so many good ones that depend on your resources and your skill level. But there are subtitle services out there. They're not really meant for podcasts because podcasts are an audio file. Oh, Mary asked, sell. I meant sell something. Yes, you can absolutely use podcasts to sell something. However, I will come with the caveat of people don't go to buying things as entertainment necessarily. Some people do. The shopping channel is definitely a thing. But podcasts are primarily to entertain or inform. You can definitely sell things along the way. That is why podcast ads are so prominent and so prevalent. Pretty much every single podcast that runs long enough has some sort of sponsor, and they do work. That's why companies keep selling through these podcasts. But the purpose of the podcast isn't meant to be a sales tool. It is meant to entertain or inform on a specific subject, and it's great if you sell something along the way. Victoria asked, what is the reality of making money from podcasts? Like most online forms of entertainment or information, obviously the biggest ones at the top are the ones that make the most money, but the vast majority of podcasts that make any money at all comes from those sponsorships I was talking about earlier. I think the running joke in the industry, the ones that are most likely to give you a sponsorship are ones like Honey or Audible. Audible sponsors a lot of podcasts, but you have to have a running audience before they'll take any interest in you. There are also affiliate programs out there, say as Amazon. If you were talking about a specific product and it was for sale on Amazon, you can sign up for Amazon's affiliate program so that if people use your code when they purchase the thing, you'll get a bit of a kickback on it. That is how the vast majority of podcasts make their money, if they do make money. But the very little of the podcast income comes from actually selling the episode. It's just such a negligible amount. When you go for long enough, you can absolutely start making some decent money from a podcast. The top ones out there definitely make tens of thousands of dollars per episode. But when you're just getting started, it really needs to be more of a passion project or a long-term goal. You're not going to be making money on the very first episode you put out because it takes time to build the audience. It takes time to build the attention, and it takes time for companies who might sponsor you to pay you for it. However, if you're not looking necessarily to immediately make money from podcasts, it could just be a really great marketing tool for your business to get attention and trust in your existing business. Let's see. Mark, apologies. That was a nonsensical question at this point. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, apologies for responding to things already that you guys didn't need to ask anymore. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay in when I notice questions and when I get time to answer them. So if I repeat anything you didn't need questions for anymore, I apologize, but we still have about 5 minutes if there's any other questions. You guys have been a wonderful audience, by the way, with a lot of really great questions. So thank you so much for asking them at this point. Thank you guys so much for coming. I should hit stop record on this so there's not just dead air.